This is Radio Vault on 89.3 WHFR, the station that makes waves.
The National Broadcasting Company presents The Big Show. The first half hour presented by the makers of Reynolds Aluminum, the Reynolds Metals Company, and starring the glamorous, unpredictable Tallulah Bankhead.
The late Dick Kernen, a man we all knew and loved over at Specs Howard, who started a lot of careers, is going to share some words of wisdom. Then we're going to go straight to the man behind Radio Dayz. This, by the way, is Radio Vault. We are WHFR Dearborn from the campus of Henry Ford College, and we feature independent music from all genres. But right now, let's go to Dick Kernen.
Most of the program forms that are on television today started on radio. Back in the 30s and 40s, radio did cop shows and doctor shows and game shows and talent, all of that stuff. Well, obviously, television comes along with pictures in your living room. Get out of here. When television came along, radio had to do something. And the first thing they did is the same thing that every industry does when they have a problem, is they let people go. Keep in mind, if you're going to do a half-hour drama on radio, you need actors, actresses, directors, producers, writers. They couldn't afford to do that. And so they just bailed out of that, and they said, well, what are we going to do? We got to be on the air. I know, let's just play music, and we'll figure it out later.
The voice of Dick Kernen, who appeared on the docudrama Radio Dayz. Back, how long ago was that when you interviewed Dick Kernen, Ron?
That was 2014. 2014 is when I interviewed Dick.
Your very first interview, and you didn't even know you were going to do a documentary, did you?
Well, I had the idea of a documentary, but the initial idea was to make a little short about the rock and roll DJ specifically, and what the evolution and de-evolution, as it were, as to why they weren't maybe quite as important as they were in the 70s and 80s.
So
then it just evolved. It evolved into a story about 101 years of broadcasting. So it was pretty cool.
Right. So when was the first time that you thought radio was something pretty cool? Were you a listener? Did you think, oh, I want to do that? When did that happen?
Well, for me, it was actually a television event, but it was the Disco Demolition in Chicago, and I mean that was a radio promotion. Even though people think of TV when that happened, but and then I was introduced at a young age to the War of the Worlds. But like most people on the radio, for me it was the possibility of theater of the mind that really captured my imagination and made me want to get into that.
Sure. Well, as you know, we're kind of all about the theater of the mind on this program, but we kind of like to delve a little bit into the background of things,
yes.
About how it all happened, and Dick Kernen, that recording kind of gave us a little hint of how it all happened. A radio drama costs a lot of money to produce back then, and today it would be like astronomical to do
it wouldn't be feasible.
Yeah. To do a drama today would cost thousands of dollars, and it cost $1,000 back 30, 40, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, certainly. So you started doing these interviews, and do you remember the next couple interviews you did and where you went from there?
Yeah, I interviewed radio's best friend, Art Vuolo, was an early interview. Another early interview I did was with Chuck Santoni. He was one of the early interviews. But there's like 40 people, historians and DJs and radio personalities. And you know what? It really evolved when I went to Memphis because, you talked about radio shows, and when TV came around, it really became too expensive for a radio station to produce these dramas or serials, if you will. So they went to music. I mean,
sure.
There's another great line from Dick Kernen when he's talking about, as far as the music aspect of it, And so I went to Memphis because that's kind of where the blues started, Mississippi and Memphis. But Memphis was the first black radio station, WGIA, and a lot of the blues that they were playing came from Memphis, but also came from Mississippi and those tri-county areas over there. And so then it was just off to the races when I got that stuff, because then it just kind of took shape and said, okay, I need to like document from 1920 to current day the different eras of radio from the perspective of a Detroit kid, and that's what I ended up with.
Sure. Now, you and I worked together over at Specs, Howard, and you were originally an audio guy like me.
Yes.
So when did you decide? Oh, I want to make this into a video. I want to do a movie. When did that all go down?
Well, wow, there's a lot of. I'm trying to think of where the beginning goes, because my intro to video actually started in Benton Harbor, St. Joe. I was working at a news talk station called WSJM for a news director named Mike Frazier, who was way ahead of the game, because this was 2002, 2003. And when we would go cover news stories for the radio station, we weren't taking audio recording of devices. We were taking camcorders.
Oh, wow.
And we were documenting the news. And so we would come back to the station and get the radio stuff on the air. But then we'd also have like TV news packages where I would stand up, in front of the story, interview some people, get some B-roll. So we were running TV news pack, and that was my first exposure to like this video is something crazy. But then, fast forward to 2010, I was a program director at a country station in Fort Smith, Arkansas, of all places, station called KMAG. And when I left there to come back home to the Detroit area, I kind of started. That's when I started my video production company, and I taught myself, the video aspect of it, telling a story and that kind of thing. So I kind of self-taught myself that, but it was a gradual learning experience. But again, I mean, we live in the day of video.
Yes, you
got to have video no matter what you do, and so it was a little bit difficult as far as knowing the composing shots and this and that and the other thing, but it's just an extension of the stories we were telling on radio. But now we have the benefit of utilizing video, and that's just kind of how it evolved, Bob.
Okay. So it was kind of ingrained in you from the pretty early days of when you were one of your first radio jobs, I guess.
And what's interesting is I knew that I was always going to make some kind of documentary about radio when I started my business in 2010. And my business was a video production business, basically creating commercials for businesses to promote themselves. But even though this is my fourth documentary that I've produced, this is the one that I was like, okay, you're going to do this. And I had no idea what that was going to look like. But now that it's finally done, and the idea was to make a documentary movie, but I had so much content, there was just too much information to make it a 90-minute film. So, we live in the day and age of episodal television, and so that's what I did. I made it 5 episodes, and that's what happened.
5 episodes. Wow. That's amazing. When you first started putting this together, I thought, oh, this is probably going to be an hour and a half, 2-hour movie.
Yeah.
But the more you went, and all those audio podcasts, which were all fascinating, by the way.
Thank you. I'm about to start a new season, by the way. Got some great guests coming up too.
So yeah, that's exciting. And then, sadly, we lost some of the people that you interviewed, as you know.
Yeah.
And that was tough.
You asked me about my first interview, Dick Kernen. Obviously, he passed away during the COVID. And then my last interview was done with Ken Calvert, who we just lost just before Christmas. So and there's 4 or 5 people in this documentary that have since passed, and it's just this is dedicated to them. But you'll notice specifically after you watch episode 1 that the entire series is dedicated to the late Dick Kernen.
Good. Well, one, I want to do another clip here. One who is still alive and making incredible music, just saw him a few days ago, as a matter of fact, is Mark Pazman, the Paz.
Yeah.
And Mark actually played on 2 or 3 of our WHFR fundraising CDs. with his old
Awesome.
band, Mud Puppy back in the day. And a lot of people don't know that Mark Pazman was the first program director over at WRIF. That's correct, isn't it?
Yes. 1984, he was the PD over there.
1984, and he's a musician, and he was behind the Dick the Bruiser band that was featured prominently on the morning show with JJ. We're going to hear just a few minutes of Mark talking about kind of what it was like.
When George would come up with a parody tune, the musician would get to go in the studio, produce it up. That was like one of my best radio gigs ever. And then, I don't know who it was that says, well, why don't we get a band and get out there and play, make it a promotional arm of the radio station. The songs are red hot. And we ended up selling, doing a Bruiser Band album. Our opening gig was opening for Mitch Ryder at Pine Knob, full house, Major Storm. We had some great gigs, and we were a bunch of ragtag. My first bass player was one of the sales guys because we couldn't find anybody. Our Tommy Dalden from Promotions was on drums, so it was a real family thing. And it was also a way to be a part of, this radio juggernaut, but I'm still in a band. I'm still playing my guitar. I'm still, smiling at pretty girls. So it was a very special time promotionally, and for me, it was a gas. And those guys just owned the town. Just amazing.
The voice of Mark Pazman, who is the guitarist for a band called now this, for some reason,
Righteous Deluxe. Righteous Deluxe.
Thank you, Righteous Deluxe, who is playing at O'Mara's, and I think he's got another gig coming up next month that perhaps you might want to check out. But radio is still alive and well, more than alive and well. And, you may hear stories that, radio is dying. People are just, people are just watching videos and their minds are in other places. And that's not entirely true. The thing with radio is it's like Michigan weather. It changes. It changes constantly. And it evolves. And one of the things that's happening over here at Henry Ford College is we have this radio station that we're lucky enough to talk on, which we're talking on right now. And anyone can be educated about this radio station and the radio business in general. This is kind of a plug for our class called TCM 189, WHFR Staff Training. And they're actually changing the name of it. Us who've been doing radio a long time, it can confuse us, but it's going to become MCA 189, Introduction to WHFR Radio. And you can become a part of our staff eventually. Apply for getting your own show, but you got to go through the class first. And the phone number to get information on that is 313-845-9624 for information about the WHFR staff training. You can see what goes on in person behind the scenes, and you'll find the radio is alive and well. And if there's a special genre of music that you enjoy, and preferably it's not anything that we hear about every day. I don't think we would allow a Taylor Swift show on our station by any means. But if you have some ideas that are a little bit different, we would love to have you on our radio station, but you got to take the class first. And once again, that number for more information about the future MCA 189 is 313-845-9624. and that ties you into the School of Liberal Arts here at Henry Ford College, and more information about the WHFR staff training class. And the cool thing is, if you're a Dearborn resident and you're over 60, it's absolutely free. There's no tuition cost if you're a local resident. But again, that number, for more information, I'm going to repeat it for the third time, 313-845-9624 for WHFR staff training. Ron, did you know that today was World Radio Day?
I did, but I learned this morning, so it's pretty cool.
Cool. Yeah. I just found out about it while I was listening to what we had on in the previous hour. I'm not even sure what it entails. I guess it missed me, but how appropriate.
As long as it brings awareness. As long as it brings awareness to this great medium. So.
That's right. That's absolutely right. So you have all these interviews. What is it, about 4 hours of?
Well, yeah, and that's kind of why I turned it. And I do want to add, you played that Mark Pasman clip. I want to add that not only did he appear in my doc, but he contributed some of the music and some of the beds that's in the series. And he mentioned Tommy Dalton, who people might recognize that name. That's the guy that hosts Under the Radar, so Tommy, that's a good throw out there. But no, and that's why I kind of came into a series, is because when I put it all together, it was about 7 hours long. And so now that I've got some editing done, but at the running time for all 5 episodes right now is 4 hours and 45 minutes. So it's something you can binge watch, to be sure. Yeah.
I watched just about the whole thing in one night.
Thank you.
Yeah,
awesome.
Yeah. It's really something else. And you have a ton of trailers that I've lifted a lot of these clips from. Where can they see these things at?
At my website, ronrobinsonstudios.com. You can get all the information. There's some information on the main page, the home page there, but there's also a page dedicated to the series where you can get links to the trailers, to the whole series, and even some outtakes. That was the great thing about having so much content and some stuff getting edited out, is I was able to put those into individual videos and make outtakes of people talking about radio. So that was cool. Yeah.
So it's roughly 4 hours long if you watch the whole thing, but you can see little snippets. And again, we'll remind everyone, these are actual video interviews that you have on tap. You heard a couple of clips just a moment ago, but there's video that goes with all of that, and video includes the people who, as we mentioned, have passed away. We lost Dick Kernen. We lost John O'Leary, tragically.
Yeah.
And most recently, it was Ken Calvert. What was Ken like when you interviewed him?
Well, I got to tell you, Ken and I became friends over the last couple of years, even before I sat down and interviewed him. And there's no one. He's more down to earth than anybody I've ever met in radio, and he was just a class act. And it was funny because when we would talk for like an hour at a time, and I would just be a sponge, and I would ask him about this and I ask him about that. I mean, you want to talk about a pioneer of Detroit radio, and not just radio. I mean, he was the public address announcer for the Pistons.
Right.
But Ken Calvert was one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet, and I have yet to find anybody say a bad word about KC.
That's what I've heard, and I saw his segment when he appeared on JJ's last week over on WOMC. That was amazing.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Right.
That was amazing. Guys who've known each other for 40 years plus.
Yeah. And I guess this is a good segue into, as anything, you kind of touched on it, that I've been doing a podcast, Radio Dayz the podcast, to promote this. And I've already gotten through 3 seasons. I'm about to start season 4. And my first guest is going to be Jim Johnson. He'll be that's coming up in a couple weeks. The first episode of season 4 And these are all video interviews, and the podcast is different in the sense that, I'm not asking the people I'm talking to necessarily about the history of radio, but more about the history of their career. So
Yeah.
we're going to talk to J.J. Johnson, and, we're going to talk about his journey from W4 to Riff to Wheels, to OMC and everything in between. So that's the other thing is, what's interesting is I saw Trudy Daniels at Ken Calvert's funeral, and she thanked me because a lot of the cuts that they aired on her program were interviews that I did with Ken Calvert for the Radio Dayz podcast
Sure.
a couple of years ago. So that's another thing is to save these stories, because radio personalities, they very rarely get to tell their story, and that's why I love doing this podcast, is because I learn behind the scenes of what their careers were like, not just what people heard. So that's another cool aspect of where this journey has taken me.
Sure. I think we have a clip that you released with Ken from 1 or 2 years ago, promoting.
This is funny. I love this clip.
Promoting it, and Ken had some hilarious things to say.
Yes.
I hope we got the right one here. Let's give it a shot.
Hey everybody, I'm Ron Robinson.
And I'm Ken Calvert, and we're here to tell you about Radio Dayz 101 Years of Radio, which last time many of you heard about was actually going to be a documentary movie.
Yeah.
And I've heard from a lot of you saying, hey, when's this movie coming out? Well, it's taken me so long to have this movie ready for public view because it's no longer a movie. It's now a 5-part docuseries. A lot of content to go through. I've interviewed 40 people, including the legendary Ken Calvert, so you don't want to miss the upcoming docuseries, Radio Dayz 101 Years of Radio. Right now, where I'm at, I'm looking for sponsors, but I'm also looking for places that might want to show these 5 episodes.
If you actually do think about possibly investing in the program, which I think you should, each and every one of you will be going home with a hat just like this. That is a big hat, Ken. You know why? Because I have a big head.
I think I should drop the mic. I don't think I should say anything else.
What are you, 5'11"?
I'm 4'7". I'm about as tall as Dr. Ruth.
I feel like I'm your dummy.
Radio Dayz 101 Years of Radio. Be on the lookout for it. Stay tuned to RonRobinsonStudios.com, where you can hear more information about this 5-part docuseries coming your way very, very soon. Thanks, Ken. Oh, I almost forgot. Radio Dayz, the podcast. Be on the lookout for Season 3 coming up. In fact, the first episode of Season 3, this man right here, Ken Calvert, where we will talk about his career from the W4 days through the Pistons days, through his time working for record companies, Riff, Wheels. He's worked at them all. And we're going to talk about Ken and his illustrious career on the first episode. In fact, it's a 2-parter. The first 2 episodes of Season 3 of Radio Dayz, the podcast, will be on its way soon. But like I said, Ken will be the first guest. Well, that was fun too, right?
That was a lot of fun. I'll tell you what, I just can't help but keep thinking about how little I've gotten over the years. My God, I've morphed into an old man. Keep going, keep going. That's it, Ron. We'll see you next time on The Ron Calvert Show.
So, Ken, thank you for participating in this movie. I appreciate it. I hope that wasn't too painful.
No, and try the sliced ham.
The sliced ham.
Gosh, it's good. Salty, too.
Perfect. A little bit from Ken Calvert. And we're talking live with Ron Robinson, who's on our WHFR line, and it's on World Radio Day. We didn't realize that until I came into the studio, and I said, well, geez, that's good, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, Radio Dayz is I don't know what to call it anymore. It's a docudrama. It's a podcast, an audio video podcast, and it's a source for information and inspiration. Radio is something you can do at any age, even if you've never been in a studio. Well, guess what? We have a couple of fine studios here at WHFR, and we can train you on them just by giving us a call and getting involved. So do that for the fifth time. It's 313-845-9624. For more information about the WHFR staff training class. In the meantime, Ron Robinson from Radio Dayz, the movie, 101 Years of Radio, is on the WHFR hotline. When did you come up with the title, Ron?
I knew I wanted to be Radio Dayz, but to be honest with you, it was once called 100 Years of Radio, but it took me so long to put it together that, I didn't want to, take, the reason I put a Z in there is because I didn't want to take away from Woody Allen's movie Radio Dayz. So, but yeah, it was just, Radio Dayz is what I think of as the days of radio, the days that radio ruled the airwaves, so to speak. And it just kind of evolved into that. Plus, my wife tells me that I'm historically infamous for making long titles for my documentary, and I can't disagree. So,
so what is it, about 40 people you've interviewed to make this happen, Ron?
That's correct. Yep. And so each one of them told the story, and like I said, they were all. I think the longest interview I did was Mike Halloran, but there's just so much good information on there. I think people are really going to like it.
And once again, where do they go on the web for information about, and maybe some sample clips to see what it's all about? Where do they go on the web?
RonRobinsonStudios.com.